Le Manoir restaurant was a hidden gem in the small town of Belhaven. With its Victorian architecture and an aura of elegance, it was known throughout the region as the perfect location for special celebrations and fine dining. It was a place where people dressed in their finest clothes, where the lights twinkled softly and the piano played soothing melodies for the diners. However, that night, the atmosphere was charged with tension, and the restaurant felt different. A group of 4 friends, Anya, Ricardo, Carla, and Joe, had chosen Le Manoir to celebrate a special occasion. Anna was about to move abroad, and this dinner was a farewell. Despite having heard of the mysterious stories surrounding the restaurant, they decided to try it for themselves. As they entered the establishment, the reception was icy. The maitre d', middle-aged man with a somber countenance, received them with a stiff bow and led them to a secluded table in the corner of the main hall. They noticed that the atmosphere was more tense than they expected. The other customers' gazes were evasive, and the usual murmur of lively conversation was absent. Sitting at the table, the friends examined the menus. The options were as extravagant as expected, with dishes ranging from lobster to foie gras. However, something strange caught Anna's attention. She observed with increasing uneasiness the elderly couple at the next table. The couple appeared to have been eating the same meal for hours, but their plates remained untouched. They cut the meat with such meticulousness that the food remained untouched. Their expressions were blank, as if they were absorbed in a trance. "Did you notice that?" Anna whispered to her friends, leaning over the table. Ricardo and Carla looked in the indicated direction. "It's strange," Ricardo agreed. They barely touched the food. Joe frowned, watching the couple with interest. "Maybe they're just enjoying the atmosphere," he suggested. As they discussed the bizarre scene around them, a waitress approached with a silver tray. She placed a covered plate in front of Anna with an unsettling smile and walked away without saying a word. Under the lid, Anna found a meat dish that looked delicious, but there was something sinister about its presentation. "Did you order meat?" Ricardo asked, looking at the plate suspiciously. Anna frowned. "No, I ordered fish." At that moment, the maitre d' approached and leaned over the table with a gloomy expression. "Beef is a house specialty tonight. I hope you enjoy it." Before Anna could protest, the maitre d' quickly walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the restaurant. The atmosphere around them became even more tense, and they shared worried looks. Carla picked up a fork and poked at the meat on Anna's plate. The meat was strangely tender, almost melting, and the sauce had an unfamiliar, disturbing flavor. "I'm not sure about that," Carla said, putting her fork away. But when Anna tried to lift the lid of the plate, something stopped her. It was as if the air around them became heavier, more oppressive. They looked around and noticed that all the other customers in the restaurant were motionless, like statues with blank looks. The tension at the table reached its peak when Ricardo tried to call the waitress. She didn't respond, as if frozen in time. "This is getting more and more bizarre," Joe muttered, as he tried in vain to get the attention of other people in the restaurant. As they watched the disturbing scene around them, a shiver ran down Anna's spine. What was happening at Le Manoir was far more sinister than any of her previously heard stories about the place. They were trapped in a macabre situation, and they had no idea how to escape it. As the night progressed, the tension at Le Manoir restaurant only increased. The friends were increasingly uneasy about the strange situation that surrounded them. The other customers remained motionless, and their empty looks seemed to penetrate the souls of Anna, Ricardo, Carla, and Joe. Ricardo, always the bravest of the group, decided to get up and walk to the restaurant's bar, hoping to find some explanation to the bizarre situation. As he walked away from the table, his friends watched anxiously, fearful of what might happen. At the bar, Ricardo found the bartender standing, with a glass in his hand, but he was also motionless and unresponsive. He tried to get the man's attention, but it was as if he was in another world. The bartender didn't react, and Ricardo returned to the table, discouraged and worried. "There's no sign of life around here," he reported to his friends. "It's like everyone is stuck in some kind of trance." Carla looked around with an air of growing apprehension. "I think we need to get out of here as quickly as possible. This situation is ominous. Too much for me." As they discussed their options, Anna noticed that the elderly couple at the next table continued their meal tirelessly. Their empty eyes stared at their plates, as if they were under some kind of enchantment. She wondered if there was any connection between these strangers and the macabre atmosphere that surrounded the restaurant. They decided to call the Maitre d', hoping he could explain what was going on. The shadowy man appeared at the table once again, his face impassive as always. The friends expressed their concern about the bizarre situation, mentioning the motionless customers and the mystery meat that Anna had received. The maitre d' listened carefully, and when he finally spoke, his voice had an icy tone. "That's our specialty tonight. I hope you enjoyed the experience." "Experience? That's scary," Joe exclaimed. Before they could question him further, Carla, who was sitting by the window, noticed something out of place. The rain falling outside had turned into a violent storm, with lightning ripping through the window. The sky was dark. The street was deserted, and the wind howled through the trees. "Something is very wrong here," Anna said, looking out the window uneasily. "We need to get out." At that moment, Carla got up to use the bathroom. The others watched her as she walked away from the table, but when minutes passed and she didn't return, worry began to set in. "What's taking so long?" Ricardo asked impatiently. Joe stood up and looked around. "I'm going to check the bathroom." Carla shouldn't be taking so long. He walked away towards the corridor that led to the bathrooms, but before disappearing from sight, he turned and waved to Anna and Ricardo, asking them to wait. The minutes turned into an agonizing wait, and the friends began to get more and more restless. Finally, Joe returned, but his expression was one of shock. "Carla isn't in the bathroom. I didn't find her anywhere." Anna and Ricardo exchanged looks of horror. What was happening in that sinister restaurant? Carla had simply disappeared, and the macabre atmosphere that surrounded them became even more oppressive. The maitre d' approached once again, with a cold smile on her lips. Miss Carla has decided to join the owners of the basement restaurant." They were eager to get to know her better. The friends' hearts sank. They were in an increasingly terrifying situation, and the restaurant seemed to be more than just a strange place. It was a living nightmare, and they had no idea how to escape him. The news of Carla's disappearance hit Anna, Ricardo, and Joe like a paralyzing shock. They looked at the maitre d', their gazes alternating between disbelief and terror. "What do you mean by the owners of the restaurant?" asked Anna, her voice shaking. "Where is our friend? What did you do to her?" The maitre d' smiled sinisterly, as if he was delighting in their fear. The restaurant owners have their own ways of entertaining themselves. They thought Carla would be an interesting dinner guest tonight. Ricardo advanced toward the maitre d', his fists clenched in anger. "Are you telling us that Carla is in that sinister room in the basement, being dined by these owners?" The maitre d' did not respond, but his eyes glittered with a mischief that made it clear that he was amused by their anguish. Joe, looking around, noticed that the other customers remained motionless, as if they were in some kind of trance. He wondered if they too had been victims of the restaurant's owners. "We can't just let this happen," exclaimed Anna. "We need to find a way to rescue Carla." The maitre d' just laughed, a cold, menacing sound. "You guys, they're trapped here, just like everyone else. There is no escape. What the owners decide to do is final." Determined to save their friend, Anna, Ricardo, and Joe decided to take desperate measures. They knew they couldn't trust the maitre d' or anyone else in the restaurant, so they began looking for clues that they would lead to the basement. They explored the halls of the restaurant, their footsteps echoing in the void. The golden chandeliers and candles still cast a somber light over the room, but the atmosphere was heavier than ever. As they made their way through dark hallways and empty rooms, they realized that the architecture of the restaurant was transforming before their eyes, as if the walls were moving and the spaces were being redesigned. Finally, they found a narrow staircase that led to the basement. It was an eerie place, lit by candles that cast distorted shadows in the basement. Walls. Strange, archaic symbols were carved into the surfaces, emanating a sense of malignancy. "This is very disturbing," whispered Ricardo, as they went down the stairs. In the basement, a strangely decorated room awaited them. Mysterious symbols were drawn on the floor, and candles burned on pedestals around the room. In the center, a table was set with plates of food reminiscent of Carla's meal. Anna stepped forward, her heart racing. "Carla," she called, her voice breaking. She and her friends stared in horror at the scene before them. Carla was sitting at the table, but her expression was empty and apathetic, like that of the other customers in the restaurant. She didn't respond to their calls, as if she were in a trance. The owners of the restaurant. They were sitting at the table, their faces wrinkled and their eyes empty. They were not eating ordinary food, but something that resembled human flesh. Horror flooded Anna, Ricardo, and Joe as they watched the macabre scene. They realized they were in the middle of a terrifying nightmare, and that the restaurant's owners were more than just human. As they tried to process the terrifying sight before them, they heard malicious laughter echoing off the walls. It was the mrnightmare who appeared behind them, blocking the only exit from the basement. "Finally, you've made it to dinner," he said with a cruel smile. "I hope you have an appetite." The nightmare was far from over, and Anna, Ricardo, and Joe would face an unspeakable horror at the hands of the restaurant's owners. They were trapped in a terrifying situation with no hope of escape. The basement of restaurant Le Manoir was immersed in a nightmarish atmosphere. The maitre d', with his cruel smile, blocked the only exit, while the elderly couple sat at the table, empty eyes fixed on the meat dishes that resembled something terribly human. Carla remained apathetic, as if she had been hypnotized, and her friends were trapped with no visible way out. Anna, Ricardo, and Joe felt panic rising within them as they tried to devise an escape plan. The room was filled with mysterious symbols and burning candles, creating dancing shadows on the walls. The oppressive atmosphere felt suffocating, and the feeling that something terrible was about to happen hung in the air. The maitre d', still smiling sinisterly, took a step toward them. "You chose an interesting time to join us." Our meal was about to begin. Ricardo could no longer contain his anger and despair. "What did you do to Carla? What's going on here?" The maitre d' ignored Ricardo's question and continued to approach. It was as if he took pleasure in torturing them with suspense. It was then that Joe noticed something on the floor near the table. "There is something written here," he said, pointing to the mysterious symbols on the floor. "They appear to be part of some kind of ritual." The friends approached, looking at the symbols. They were complex and seemed to have been drawn with ritualistic precision. As they watched, the symbols began to emit a faint glow, and a strange feeling of electricity in the air intensified. It was then that Anna had an idea. She remembered the diary they found in the Shadow Mansion and the obsidian eye that had broken the curse in that story. Was it possible that a similar artifact was hidden here? She shared her theory with friends. "If there is an object, like the obsidian eye here, we could use that to break the power of this place," suggested Anna. Ricardo, despite his anxiety, agreed. "It's worth a try. Those symbols on the floor must be linked to some form of ritual." Joe took a candle and broke it, revealing a small black stone inside it. It was an obsidian. Carefully, he placed it in the center of the symbols on the floor, and a wave of energy swept through the room. The elderly couple began to mutter in a strange language, and the maitre d' stepped back with a shocked expression. The evil energy that had dominated the basement began to dissipate, and the friends felt momentary relief. Carla was still listless, but there was a chance to rescue her now. "Quickly, we have to get her out of here," said Anna, taking Carla by the arm. Ricardo and Joe followed her as they left the basement, taking the obsidian with them. As they climbed the stairs, they heard the elderly couple scream in despair and the maitre d' curse in frustration. Back in the main hall, everything seemed to be back to normal. Customers were back to their dinners and lively conversations, as if nothing had happened. The rain outside had stopped, and the oppressive atmosphere in the basement seemed to have disappeared. Carla began to slowly regain consciousness, blinking and looking around in confusion. Her friends hugged her in relief, quickly explaining what had happened. The maitre d', still visibly shaken, watched them with hatred in his eyes. Friends wasted no time. They ran to the exit from the restaurant, leaving behind the nightmare they had faced. The moment they crossed the threshold, Le Manoir restaurant disappeared before their eyes, leaving only an abandoned building in place. They were finally free from that macabre nightmare. Although they rescued Carla, they knew that the memory of what they had faced in that restaurant would haunt their nightmares for the rest of their lives. The mystery of Le Manoir restaurant remained unsolved, but Anna, Ricardo, Carla, and Joe O learned the darkest way that some horror stories are more real than one can imagine. They swore never to speak of that night again, but they knew they had narrowly escaped something that was far beyond human comprehension.